My husband died on a Tuesday. I know that sounds like an odd way to start, but that's the detail that stayed with me. Not the hospital room. Not the sound of the machines going quiet, just that it was a Tuesday, and outside the window there were people walking dogs and drinking coffee and completely unaware that my entire world had just collapsed into something I didn't have a name for yet. His name was Aaron. We'd been married for 6 years. He was 34 years old, and he died from a brain aneurysm that nobody saw coming. Not his doctor, not me, not him. He went to work on a Monday morning complaining about a headache. By Tuesday afternoon, he was gone. I was 29 years old and I didn't know how to be a widow. The days after were a blur that I can only describe as functioning on autopilot. I made phone calls. I signed papers. I picked out a casket in a room that smelled like carpet cleaner and lilies, and I remember thinking how strange it was that someone had to design that room, had to choose those carpet colors, had to decide what music to pipe in softly in the background. I thought about the weirdest things in those first days. My sister-in-law, Aaron's younger sister, came immediately. She drove 4 hours from Columbus the night she found out, showed up at my door at 2 in the morning with a bag of groceries and red eyes, and she just held me in the doorway for a long time without saying anything. That's the kind of person she is. My own family took a little longer to respond. My mother called the morning after Aaron died. She cried on the phone, which I appreciated, and she said all the right things. She was so sorry, she loved me, she'd be there for whatever I needed. My brother texted. He said, "Thinking of you, sis," and then I didn't hear from him again for almost 2 weeks. That should have told me something right there. Aaron and I didn't have children. We'd been trying, that's something I don't talk about much. But we'd had a miscarriage 8 months before he died, and we were still quietly trying to heal from that when everything fell apart. So when he died, it was just me. Me in our apartment, surrounded by his things, his coffee mug still on the dish rack, his shoes still by the door. My mother offered to come stay with me. I told her she didn't have to. She said she'd come anyway. I think part of me believed she would. She didn't, for the first week. She said she had things to sort out. I didn't push. The funeral was set for the following Saturday, 8 days after he died. I'd chosen Saturday deliberately so that people could travel, so that Aaron's work friends and college roommates and extended family could actually be there without having to take time off. I wanted the people who loved him to be able to say goodbye. I told my mother the date. She said she'd be there. On the Wednesday before the funeral, my brother called me. Not to ask how I was, not to check on arrangements. He called to tell me that he and his wife had planned something for that Saturday, and that they were really sorry but they weren't going to be able to make it to the service. I asked him what he had planned. He paused for a second and then said they were doing a thing at their house. A get-together. He'd been meaning to have people over to see the renovations they'd done on the kitchen, and the date had kind of just landed on that weekend, and he hoped I understood. I sat there on my couch holding the phone, and I truly did not know how to respond to that. A get-together. For a kitchen renovation. On the day of his brother-in-law's funeral, I said, very quietly, "Are you serious right now?" And he said, "And I want you to understand that I am not exaggerating. I am not misremembering, because this sentence has lived in my head ever since." He said, "It's not like it's a huge thing, the funeral. He'll have plenty of people there. We already invited everyone. It's not like it's a huge thing." I hung up. I sat in my apartment, in the silence that had become my constant companion that week. And I cried in a way I hadn't cried since the hospital. Not from grief, this time. From something that felt more like the ground disappearing under my feet. When I called my mother to tell her what my brother had said, I expected her to be horrified. I expected her to say that was unacceptable. I expected her to be my mother. Instead, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Well, honey, he already sent out the invitations. It would be really hard to cancel at this point." I think that was the moment something changed in me. Not broke, changed. Like something calcified. Like I felt a wall go up inside my chest that I hadn't put there on purpose. But once it was there, I couldn't pretend I didn't feel it. "He already sent out the invitations," I repeated. "I know it's bad timing," she said. "I know. But you know your brother, he doesn't think sometimes. He doesn't think sometimes," as if forgetting to pick up milk was not thinking sometimes. As if showing up late to a birthday dinner was not thinking sometimes. As if skipping his brother-in-law's funeral for a kitchen reveal party was the same category of minor, forgivable, oops. I told my mother that I needed to go. She said, "I'll still be there Saturday, don't worry." That Friday, the day before the funeral, she called and told me she wasn't coming either. Her reason was that she didn't want things to be awkward between her and my brother, since she'd been planning to stop by his house after the funeral anyway. And now as she came to the funeral and he didn't, it would create tension. She said she didn't want to be caught in the middle. She said she hoped I understood. She said, "You know how he gets." I did not respond. I simply said okay and ended the call. I called Aaron's sister that night. I didn't even have to say much. She could hear it in my voice. She said, "Tell me," and I told her. And she was quiet for a long time and then she said, "I will be there. I will be right beside you the entire day. I promise." She kept that promise. The funeral was on a gray November Saturday. Aaron's parents were there, devastated and quiet and gracious. His college friends flew in from 2 different states. His manager from work came with 3 of his coworkers. His childhood neighbor, a woman in her 70s who'd known him since he was 6 years old, sat in the 3rd row and cried into a handkerchief. My side of the room was smaller. 2 of my friends came. A woman I'd worked with for 3 years came and squeezed my hand and didn't let go for most of the service. Aaron's sister sat on my left and didn't leave my side once. My mother was not there. My brother was not there. I stood at that podium and I spoke about Aaron and I talked about his laugh and the way he always burned the first batch of pancakes on purpose because he claimed it seasoned the pan, and the way he'd stopped to help a stranger change a tire once and been 40 minutes late to our first anniversary dinner, and shown up with wildflowers he'd bought from a gas station, and somehow that was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for me. I talked about him and I did not fall apart, because I had made a promise to myself that I would get through that day standing up. Afterward, Aaron's father hugged me for a long time and said, "He loved you so much." That was the sentence that finally made me cry. I got through the reception. I hugged people. I thanked them for coming. I ate half a sandwich and drank 2 cups of terrible coffee. And then I went home to my apartment and sat in the dark for a while. My mother texted at 9 p.m. She said the party had been really nice and that she was glad she'd gone. She said she'd come visit me next weekend probably. She said she loved me. I stared at that message for a long time. I want to be honest about what happened after that, because I think people expect a clean narrative. The moment you decide enough is enough, the triumphant confrontation, the catharsis. But grief doesn't work that way, and family dysfunction doesn't work that way. What actually happened was slower and messier and more painful than any clean narrative could contain. I didn't cut them off immediately. I went quiet. I stopped initiating. When my mother called, I answered less and less frequently. When I did talk to her, I gave short answers. I was polite, but I was not warm, and I think some part of her knew something had shifted because she started asking me periodically if I was still upset about the funeral thing. The funeral thing. That's what it became in her language. The funeral thing. My brother never acknowledged it at all. He sent me a Christmas card that year with a photo of his kitchen renovation on the front, I'm not joking, and a note inside that said, "Hope you're doing well, miss you." As if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't chosen grout selection over his dead brother-in-law. About 3 months after Aaron died, I found out something that recontextualized a lot of what had come before. Aaron and I had been renting our apartment, but we'd been saving to buy a place. We had a joint savings account. After he died, I had access to it obviously, but I was going through paperwork one night. The kind of late-night insomnia-fueled paperwork spiral that grief does to you. And I found some documents I hadn't seen before. Aaron had inherited a small amount of money from his grandfather a few years before we met. Not a huge amount, but meaningful. About $40,000 that he put away carefully and never touched. He'd never mentioned it much. It wasn't hidden from me, but it also wasn't something we talked about at length. In his will, everything came to me. My brother called me the week after I discovered this. He hadn't called me proactively in months, and suddenly he was calling. I didn't put it together immediately. He asked how I was doing. Very warmly, very brotherly. Said he'd been thinking about me a lot. Then gradually, over the course of about 20 minutes, he worked around to asking whether I had sorted out Aaron's finances yet, and whether there was anything left over, and whether I'd thought about what I was going to do with all of it. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say maybe he was asking out of genuine concern, but something about the way he said it, that careful casualness, that practiced nonchalance, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I told him I was still working through everything. He said, "Well, obviously if you need anything, we're here. And obviously we're family, so if there was ever anything you wanted to share, spread around a little." He laughed like it was a joke. I didn't laugh. I talked to Aaron's sister that night, like I talked to her most nights those first months. She had become, in the absence of my own family, the family I actually had. I told her about the phone call. She didn't say much. She just said, "You know what you need to do." I did know. I'd known for a while. I was just still trying to love people who had made it very clear how they were going to treat me when it counted. I want to talk about something that I don't hear discussed enough when people talk about cutting off family. And it's this: it's not one big dramatic moment. It's 100 small moments of choosing yourself, and each one is harder than it looks from the outside. It's not a door slamming. It's a door you close slowly, gently, after standing in the doorway for a long time waiting to see if anyone comes through it. I stopped calling my mother first. Then I stopped responding to her texts as quickly. When she'd ask me to visit, I'd say I was busy. I was honest with myself about what I was doing and why. I wasn't punishing her, I was protecting myself. There is a difference. My brother, I cut more cleanly. After that phone call about Aaron's money, I didn't pick up when he called. He left a voicemail once, cheerful and oblivious, asking if I wanted to come see the new deck he was building. I saved the voicemail. I still have it, not out of bitterness, but because it's such a perfect encapsulation of who he is, completely unable to see anything from outside his own orbit. The person I found hardest to let go of was my mother. Because she wasn't cruel the way my brother was casual, she wasn't indifferent, she was just weak. She had spent her whole life making herself small in relation to my brother, managing his feelings, smoothing things over, keeping the peace. And she chose to do that even when the cost was her daughter standing at her husband's funeral with half an empty row beside her. I had a conversation with her eventually, about 6 months after Aaron died. She'd been pressing me to come home for Easter, and I had finally, after months of deflection, decided to say the thing directly. I told her that I had not forgiven her for not coming to Aaron's funeral, that I understood she had her reasons, and I understood her relationship with my brother was complicated, but that when I needed her most, she had chosen his comfort over my grief, and that it changed something in me that I wasn't sure could change back. She cried. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't realized how much it hurt me. She said she thought I had plenty of people around me. I told her that wasn't the point. I told her that she was my mother, and that I had needed her to be my mother, and that she had not been. She said she didn't know what I wanted from her. I said I didn't want anything from her. I just wanted her to understand what had happened. And then I said I needed some space, and I ended the call. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a screaming match. It was just the truth, spoken plainly, and the silence after it. I won't tell you it felt good. It didn't feel good. It felt like loss on top of loss, and for a long time after I questioned whether I'd been too hard, whether I was being unfair, whether grief had made me unreasonable. I went to therapy. I'm still in therapy. My therapist helped me understand something important, which is that you can love someone and still recognize that they failed you. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. About a year after Aaron died, I moved. Left the apartment we'd shared, left the city we'd built our life in, moved to a smaller city a few states away where Aaron's sister had offered to help me get settled. I found a job. I found an apartment with good light and a little balcony where I put plants. I started running, which I had never done before, because I needed something to do with the particular kind of grief that lives in your body. I still think about Aaron every day. That's not a sad statement, it's just a true one. I think about him when I burn the first pancake on purpose. I think about him when it rains. I think about him when I see wild flowers at a gas station. My mother and I have a relationship now, of a kind. Careful and cordial, with distance built into it that I don't think will ever fully close. She calls on my birthday. I pick up. We talk about surface things. She asks about my plants, my brother. I don't speak to. He reached out once. About a year and a half after Aaron died, when he apparently heard through my mother that I'd moved. He texted me, "Heard you moved. Hope the new place is good." Like we were acquaintances. Like nothing had ever happened. I read the message and I put the phone down and I didn't respond. Some doors, once you close them, you don't need to reopen. I want to say something to anyone who is listening to this and recognizing something of their own life in it, because I know that's why these stories find the people they find. Not for the drama, not for the outrage, but for the recognition. I thought it was just me. It isn't just you. Some families do not rise to the moment. Some people, even people who love you in their limited way, will choose their comfort over your pain every single time. And recognizing that is not bitterness, it's clarity. And clarity, even when it's painful, is a form of grace. I am 31 years old now. I have my plants and my little balcony and a job I find meaningful. I have Aaron's sister, who texts me memes on bad days and remembers his birthday and cried with me the first time I laughed, really laughed, after he died. I have a therapist who challenges me and 2 friends who have never once made me feel like my grief was inconvenient. I am not who I was before Aaron died. I don't think I'm supposed to be. But I am still standing, and I am still choosing myself, one small, quiet door at a time. I used to think that the people who hurt us most were the ones who meant to, the ones who looked you in the eye and chose cruelty deliberately. But what I learned, slowly, painfully, in the months and years after Aaron died, is that the deepest wounds often come from people who weren't even paying enough attention to realize what they were doing. My brother didn't skip Aaron's funeral out of hatred. He skipped it because he simply didn't weigh my grief against his plans and decide mine mattered less. He skipped it because he never weighed it at all. That's not better. In some ways, it's worse. Hatred at least implies you registered the other person's existence. There's a cause and effect to everything, and I don't mean that in any mystical sense. I mean it plainly, practically. My brother spent years being allowed to not think about other people, by my mother, by our family, by the general arrangement of things in our household growing up where his comfort was managed and protected and everyone else quietly adjusted around it. That pattern produced a man who could send a Christmas card with a photo of his kitchen renovation on the front to his widowed sister, not out of cruelty, out of a complete and total absence of the habit of considering how things land on someone else. And my mother, her pattern was different but its own kind of failure. She learned, somewhere along the way, that keeping the peace was safer than telling the truth. That smoothing things over was easier than standing in the discomfort of a hard moment. So when the hardest moment of my life arrived, she did what she had always done. She managed the easier relationship and let the harder one wait. I was the harder one. I was always going to still be there. My brother needed more careful handling. What I had to learn, and what took me longer than I'd like to admit, was that understanding why people fail you doesn't obligate you to keep absorbing it. I understood my mother's patterns completely. I had compassion for how she became who she is, and I still had to step back, because compassion for someone's history is not the same as consent to be harmed by their present. The intelligence in all of this, the thing that actually took work to develop, was learning to see clearly without letting that clarity collapse into bitterness. Bitterness would have been easy, bitterness would have felt justified, but bitterness would have meant staying in a story as a victim, and I refused to do that to myself. What Aaron's death gave me in the wreckage of everything else it took was the absolute inability to keep pretending. I could not pretend anymore that certain relationships were something other than what they were. The resilience wasn't in the cutting off, it was in the continuing. In finding the apartment with good light, in learning to run, in burning the first pancake on purpose, in letting Aaron's sister be the family that showed up, because she did show up, because that's who she is, because some people are simply built differently, and the world has those people in it too. I am still here. I am still learning, and I know now, in a way I didn't before, that the people worth keeping are the ones who come through the door when it matters. Not the ones who text afterward to say the party was nice.